Smartphones have arguably defined how we interact with information. They've become so much more than just tools. They're practically an extension of who we are. We take them everywhere. But why are we so dependent on these rectangular slabs? It's simple. They fit into our pockets, they're always within reach, and over the years, they've evolved into this perfect blend of communication, entertainment, and productivity. But here's the thing. For more than a decade, this form factor hasn't really changed. You get the same rectangular slab that come in various forms running Android or iOS. But what if that could be different? What if our phones could transform into something more? Well, that's where foldables come in. Now, the idea isn't exactly new. The first one launched back in 2018 by L'Oreal. It was bold, but far from perfect. And since then, big players like Samsung, Huawei, Motorola, Oppo, and even Google have been pushing to refine the concept to make it practical. And let's be honest, foldables, they always grab attention. You see them trending on social media or in videos like this one that you're watching. But what's it like to actually live with one? And to find out, I am committing to using a foldable as my only device for an entire week. That means I have no access to my laptop, not even the Mac Studio when I'm here at the office. It's just me and this phone. And as someone with very little real-world experience using foldables, I wanted to see both sides of the story, the benefits and the compromises. And the phone in question is this, the Galaxy Z Fold 7 from Samsung. Now, for $2,000, yes, $2,000 US, which basically translates to a mortgage payment here in Canada, I really wish if Samsung included the S Pen, but here's the kicker. With this generation of the Fold, they've removed the S Pen digitizer entirely in order to slim down the form factor. So even if you wanted to, you can't. And slim it down they did. Folded, the phone measures just 8.9 millimeters. For context, my iPhone 16 Pro is just 8.3 millimeters, so not a huge difference. And when you unfold it, you're holding a massive screen that's only 4.2 millimeters thin. It's basically a tablet that is thinner than regular smartphones. It also doesn't weigh that much. On paper, it's only about 15 grams heavier than my iPhone, and honestly, I didn't feel the difference. This year's launch color is called Blue Shadow, and I really like it, except the fact that the paint's starting to chip away for many users, mine included. I mean, the phone's only been out for a few months, and this already. I mean, trust me, this is just after a week of using the Fold. I just can't imagine what this would look like 6 months later, a year later. So this certainly fails a durability test, as I've also noticed some hairline scratches on the cover screen as well. They've borrowed some DNA from the Galaxy S25 Ultra, including that massive 200 megapixel sensor, and the camera bump is real. Seriously, this thing is a joke. I wish they placed the cameras horizontally as opposed to the vertical integration. The cover screen comes in at 6.5 inches, and while it feels taller than most Android phones, and even my iPhone, when you actually stack them side by side, the size is remarkably close. Watching 21:9 content, for example, on this display is an absolute treat. If you're a fan of that aspect ratio, or just movies that are shot in that ratio, this phone just nails it. I've even made videos in this format, and it uses every single pixel of the screen with no black bars. It's just so good. It's also easier to grip and surprisingly comfortable to use one-handed, despite the taller feel. And then when you unfold it, you're greeted with an 8-inch display that, at first glance, it just felt a little overwhelming to me. But, you know, I had to slowly start getting used to it. And for those who are wondering about the crease, honestly, it's barely noticeable unless you catch it. And if you want to see it, you'll see it, but it didn't really bother me that much. The setup and transferring data took a few hours, but the real challenge was actually learning the phone. Now, sure, this thing is running Android 16 with One UI 8, but the learning curve was steeper than I expected. A lot of the foldable specific features were disabled out of the box. For example, multi-window and pop-up view gestures had to be manually enabled in the advanced settings to use the split screen mode. Same goes for the taskbar. It's hidden by default. I switched it to Always Show, which makes it feel a lot more like a desktop with quick access to my most used apps. I also disabled cover screen mirroring, which essentially lets me set up two different home screen layouts. So on the cover screen, I've kept it simple, including my messaging apps, my social media apps, and on the main screen, it's pretty much distraction-free with productivity-focused apps that are just pinned to the taskbar. Speaking of apps, what do I use every day? Well, I guess 80% of the time, I'm on Chrome for checking out emails, responding to them, scheduling meetings. I also use it to write scripts, storyboard, YouTube for checking comments and responding to them and diving a little bit too deep into the analytics. I also use Spotify for music, DaVinci Resolve for editing videos, Adobe Lightroom for editing photos, Photoshop for designing thumbnails, Discord for staying in touch with fellow creators, and I use Notion to just keep my life in place. And the good news is that most of those apps run on the Z Fold 7, but there are certain exceptions like DaVinci Resolve Studio and Photoshop, so I'll need to figure out alternatives, which I did. So a couple days passed by. I can say I'm comfortably used to the giant 8-inch display. It's super bright, pushing close to 2,600 nits, which is great for outdoor use. It's AMOLED, LTPO, 120 Hz. It's nothing extraordinary over Samsung's flagships like the S25 Ultra or just any other smartphone with an OLED display. And this has by far the worst PWM flicker on both the main screen and the cover screen, especially at lower brightness levels. So for those of you who are sensitive to that, you should probably stay away from the Fold. Now, typing on the split virtual keyboard was fine. There are ways to set up the virtual keyboard, including adjusting the size if you have smaller hands. I also noticed that the apps are not fully optimized for the main display. For example, Reddit, Lightroom, X, Discord don't really take advantage of the bigger canvas. They just stretch out like phone apps, which just doesn't look that great. On the other hand, apps like Gmail, YouTube, Notion, messaging apps, they are all fully optimized for the larger screen. They scale beautifully, they feel like tablet apps, and they just really make use of the extra space. I've got to say, I absolutely loved using Google Maps on this main display. I mean, the large canvas almost feels like you're holding a real map, and it's clearly optimized for the screen. I can see this being a game changer for travel. But that said, app support in this form factor is still growing, so I wanted to take my portable productivity setup one step further. So enter accessories. First up, I dug out this old Lenovo Folio case from a laptop that I reviewed a few years ago. I also picked up this Proto Arc foldable wireless keyboard from Amazon for 30 bucks. And to complete the setup, I paired it with the Logitech Anywhere MX mouse. And for audio, I'm testing out the Nothing Headphones 1. Now, pairing all of these accessories went pretty seamless. The keyboard shortcuts worked as well. Things like adjusting brightness, media playback, even the quick settings access buttons on the keyboard worked like a charm. But that's where the smoothness ended. Using the keyboard and mouse isn't exactly as reliable as I hoped for. For example, on websites that are only optimized for desktop view, still requires some finessing. You need to use the touchscreen to scroll horizontally, which just breaks the flow. Editing documents in Google Docs was also frustrating. I couldn't highlight the text with the mouse, and every time I clicked somewhere in the document, the virtual keyboard popped up, even though I had a physical keyboard connected to the Fold 7. There are other smaller quirks as well. On Instagram, I just couldn't comment on stories using the keyboard. Sometimes certain apps just don't scale well on both the cover and the main screen with icons overlapping, so minimizing and opening fixes the issue. Even logging into the phone felt a bit clunky. The fingerprint reader is built into the power button and it's located on the right-hand side, which really only works naturally when you have your phone and your right thumb next to it, but it's really not ideal when you're holding the phone on your left hand. And while you can register multiple fingerprints, this location is just not ideal and it doesn't work all the time. So I had to rely on Face Unlock. It's just an easier way to log in on your main screen. So yeah, accessories definitely elevate the experience, but it's just far from a true laptop replacement. I seriously enjoyed the combination, but what if you're not an accessories type of person? How can you use the Fold 7 as is to its best? Well, meet Flex mode. By default, it's not enabled, which is really weird. I'm not sure why Samsung disables most of its own foldable focused features out of the box. It feels completely counterintuitive to the whole product. You'll still need to dive into the settings, turn them on, and make sure that all the supported apps are enabled. Once it's set up, the phone gets pretty creative. Take Google Docs, for example. It automatically splits the document on top and gives you a touchpad with a scroll wheel on the bottom. And it actually works really well. You can still bring up the virtual keyboard to type, and there are quick access buttons for things like notifications, screenshots, split screen, multitasking, quick settings, volume and brightness adjustments, and even screen recording. I found it surprisingly useful for taking meetings. It places the video feed at the top half of the screen, which lets me brainstorm ideas with Mike while keeping my notes open on the bottom half. He was also able to share his screen with some of the charts on a video he's working on, and it was pretty clear. It worked. Plus, the front-facing camera tucked into the top half doubles as a great little webcam, and honestly, its quality is way better than some of the laptops that are on the market right now. I also loved using flex mode for YouTube. It was super handy as I kicked back on my reclining chair, hands-free, spooning away at some yogurt. I just love the fact that this thing turns itself into a kickstand. It's also great for airplanes too. But what if you really want to push the Samsung Foldable experience even further? Well, that's where Samsung DeX comes in. It essentially transforms your phone into a full desktop experience. The setup is pretty straightforward. I used a USB-C dongle that had HDMI, a few USB-A ports, and even an SD card slot. One thing to note is that you'll need to plug in a power source via USB-C for DeX to actually work. Honestly, I would recommend doing this anyway since it keeps your phone charged while you're using DeX. Opening a document in Google Docs can spawn multiple floating windows. The YouTube player in Chrome isn't scaled or optimized either, so you're better off using the dedicated app, though even that can be a little finicky with limited controls, especially when you're scrubbing through a video. I really wished if Samsung DeX was able to give us the option to run sort of like a Chrome OS type of UI, which is a lot more powerful, a lot more flexible than the Android app, which just turns itself into that desktop-like format. Another thing, DeX can only show up to 5 apps on the screen at once. Once you start a 6th app, it'll minimize the oldest one, and the mouse acceleration, this is very important, was very aggressive, which honestly made it super tricky to navigate on a large monitor. When I use the mouse with the main display on the Fold, there's almost no latency. It's pretty smooth. Again, no issues whatsoever. I feel like multitasking is still the heart of the DeX experience. I can be storyboarding a video idea while keeping articles open on another window or another part of the screen, or have a YouTube playlist quietly running on the background. Most supported apps can run in resizable windows, and you can stack or even snap them side by side. You can even have the phone set up as an extended display and move your cursor between your main monitor and the main screen, which honestly is pretty brilliant. The only real limitation is that you can't use flex mode and DeX at the same time. There's also wireless DeX support where you can basically cast your compatible monitor and pair your Bluetooth keyboard and mouse accessories. I didn't get to try that because I don't have any monitors that support screen mirroring, but I can also see how latency can play a huge factor when you choose to go that route. All right, so today's challenge is to shoot and edit an Instagram reel for this Acer laptop, and I'll be using the Galaxy Z Fold 7 to make that reel. It should be fun because the camera system on this borrows a lot of the DNA from the Galaxy S25 Ultra, so it shoots 4K video, and I'm going to be pairing it to the Rode Wireless Pro mics to see if I can get some good audio as well, and then I'll bring it all together into this new app that I discovered called Adobe Premiere Rush. It has pretty good reviews on the Play Store, so I'm going to see if it works out. This should be fun. So I plugged the Fold 7 into my monitor and accessories to jot down some talking points for this video. Now, having all that extra screen real estate with Samsung DeX is super handy, especially when you can juggle between more than 2 windows at once. Then I started setting up my A-roll shot, bringing in my key light, and for tripod, I actually propped the Fold 7 on top of a giant box to make it work. I would highly not recommend doing this, and you'll see why in a bit. One of the coolest tricks with this phone is using the cover screen as a live viewfinder while shooting with the main 200 megapixel sensor. On top of that, I had multi-window running so I could keep my notes right on the screen. Seriously, this is brilliant. Once I got into filming, let's just say things got interesting. I almost dropped the phone and nearly knocked myself out with my lighting gear. Don't try this at home. After surviving that chaos, I shot some B-roll, and I've got to say, having different focal lengths is a huge plus when you want to punch in for detail shots. Now, pardon the mess here at the studio, but this is where things just went downhill. I plugged the Fold back into the monitor, fired up DeX, and tried editing the reel. And yeah, the issues just piled up real quickly. The mouse acceleration was terrible. The audio latency was unbearable because I was using Bluetooth headphones, and There is no headphone jack on the Fold 7, so I can't have wired headphones, and my dog didn't have one. So this was a nightmare for myself, but also it is a nightmare for every video creator out there. And Adobe Rush didn't even support HDR footage of a shot on the Fold 7, so everything looked completely washed out. So I ditched the monitor and switched to the portable setup. Now, I tried an app called Power Director on a free trial basis, and it wasn't optimized for the keyboard and mouse either, which just made the whole process frustrating again. In the end, I just went back to editing on the Fold's main display, and to be fair, this larger display is still better than a regular smartphone display for editing, so that definitely is a plus of having this form factor, and I did make some decent use out of it, but it still lacked the granular controls and pro level tools that I'm used to in apps like DaVinci Resolve. Still, after 6 hours, yeah, 6 hours of figuring it out, I pieced it together. And honestly, I'm proud of it. It's not as polished as some of my usual work since I normally shoot on a professional camera and I edit it on a Mac. But this experiment reminded me of just how much I value editing with a keyboard and mouse and just having all the pro tools at your disposal right away. Until we get proper optimized apps for foldables, I just don't see myself going through this whole thing again.
It felt like this was going to be a great phone for me because what I wanted to do is I wanted to get an all one and done phone.
This is my friend Steve. He's been daily driving the Galaxy Z Fold 3 for the past 4 years. That's one of the OG foldables, and he's stuck with it long term. So I asked him to share what living with it has really been like.
I opened the whole thing when the first time I held it in my hands because I hadn't. This is the very first time coming out of the box. I said, "Damn, this thing is nice." I mean, it was hefty. Frick, man, this is definitely worth the money. I can have YouTube, I can have WhatsApp, I can have Outlook all at the same time. I use it quite often, and then it has another feature. You can keep on piling apps on there, and then you just put it into center, and it just all these little icons keep on piling up, and whenever you need it, you just click on it, and then it expands. I think that's going to be very hard for me to go back to a normal phone without having multiple split screens.
Battery life has been a bit of a mixed bag. On a day when I'm mostly working from a cafe, writing scripts, doing research, and attending a few meetings, the phone easily lasted all day. I mean, I got over 5 hours of screen on time with around 30% left by the end of the day. Other days when I'm on the go, taking the transit, watching videos, using maps to navigate, and still getting some work done, I've only managed to get about 4 hours of screen on time before I had to plug it in before dinner time. At 4,400 milliamp hours, the battery just isn't enough for the ultimate power user. I really wish that they used a high density battery pack, which could have extended the runtime, but overall, it's not terrible, but it's also not great.
I thought like a 4,400 milliamp battery would be pretty hefty. Some reviewers were keying in the same thing. I mean, it's a bigger screen, it's a more powerful device. So that's probably, it's not going to be one of these 2-day phones, and I would consider myself like a heavy user, like really powering through this thing, like seriously power through it.
Let's talk cameras. Quick specs: you get 12 megapixel ultra wide, 10 megapixel telephoto, and a massive 200 megapixel main sensor. Honestly, it's not about the numbers. It takes great photos. That's all you need to know. The depth of field looks awesome and the dynamic range is solid. The 200 megapixel sensor, it's sharp as heck. Samsung does a little post-processing to bring extra detail. Low light performance is pretty good. The selfie shoots wide, but the highlights can get tricky. The 16 Pro delivers more natural looking results if I were to compare them side by side. And in terms of video performance, it's pretty solid. The stabilization is superb. Now, Samsung finally added pro controls for both photos and videos, including the ability to shoot log, which is something that I did not expect. I even played around with some grading, so let me know how it turned out. It also doesn't chew up a ton of storage, unlike the ProRes log shooting mode on the iPhone 16 Pro. That thing will just eat your storage for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I'm not saying I'm the greatest photographer, but I can snap awesome photos with this thing. Essentially what I do is I just wait or move the camera around to get enough light. I see what I have in the screen and I just press click. And it turns out great. I dropped it. I had scratches on it. It didn't look pretty. My screen just went toast. So I went to Samsung. It's right at Heartland. handed over my phone. Okay, this thing's gonna cost like 600 and something odd dollars, just under 700 bucks. I handed over the 600 and something odd dollars, and I was surprised when I got the phone back. Everything was changed. The frame, I got a brand new frame, I got a brand new hinge, of course, the screen, and also a new battery. And when I got to around the 10th month, frick, man, I had another issue with the freaking screen. It had another like little speed bump thing, and I was so careful. I know this will sound unbelievable. Man, the person that I spoke to gave me another screen, the whole 9 yards, the battery, the hinge, everything on the house. And then about a year after, it crapped out again. So then I bought another $600+ screen, and of course, they didn't give one. So I'm on my, okay, so I got one free screen, third, right? And my friend, it happened to me again. I'm on my fourth screen. If I do the cost over 4 years, and add the screens that I bought, 1,700 bucks, basically worth of screens. Yeah, I mean, I've blown way past this thing. It just doesn't even make sense.
So it's actually been more than a week since I've used the Z Fold 7. The novelty hasn't worn off. I still enjoy using it, but I definitely missed my laptop and my desktop for certain tasks. The first one is definitely video editing. I wasn't able to edit this video, for example. I had to compile all of that and turn on my PC to be able to do that again. So at the end of the day, are foldables a one-size-fits-all solution for productivity, entertainment, and gaming, for example? Not quite. The Z Fold 7 is fantastic for those who value versatility and innovation, but it doesn't fully replace traditional tools. And while foldables are gaining traction, they're still a very niche segment. I would say that this isn't sort of like the Porsche of Android phones. It's more like a Singer or a Todd Hill. They take what's already great about smartphones and just elevate the experience, refining it in ways that feel thoughtful, premium, and undeniably special. Huge shout out to my friend Steve for chiming in on his long-term experience with the Z Fold 3. A lot of the stuff that he brought up were pretty valid, especially in terms of durability. Certainly questionable, and I feel like with the Fold 7, they've kind of improved that a little bit, but it's still not quite there yet. So if you're a heavy user and if you like to toss your phones around, maybe it's not worth investing thousands and thousands of dollars on something like this. If you're a foldable smartphone user, comment down on your experience on what's the most used feature that you just cannot live without it, and whether or not if you'd actually switch back to a traditional slab style smartphone. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I'm Eber with Canucks, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.